Welcome to Rubin on Point, a podcast about cancer, resilience, and being human. I'm Dr. Dan Rubin, and together we'll uncover the true power of resilience, the strength to recover, adapt, and thrive through life's toughest challenges. Each episode will bring bold ideas, transformative practices, and inspiring stories that redefine what health, healing, and what the human spirit can achieve. And you're going to meet some really cool people along the way. If you're ready to turn obstacles into opportunities and live with greater purpose and courage, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Your journey to resilience begins now. Hi, this is Dr. Dan Rubin on Rubin on Point, a podcast where we talk a lot about cancer, a whole lot about resilience, and even more about being human. And today, my guest is Nasha. Most of you know her as Dr. Nasha or Dr. Winters. But today, I'm Dan, and she's Nasha. It's what we agreed to. Why? Because not only are we colleagues, we're both naturopathic oncologists, but we're also friends. And we also graduated from the same naturopathic medical school many years ago. And so we're going to have fun. And let's talk about some fun stuff. Let's talk about this resilience. Let's talk about these human things. You know, the podcast is about being human because I think we're in a transcendental phase. Yes, I did get a degree in existential philosophy as my undergrad and then decided to go to naturopathic medical school, which I wouldn't trade that. But you're in Mexico. I have a tan. I just came back from Mexico, actually. And we both love working with Immunoscene, which is in Mexico. And so we have so much in common. We've been really going along parallel paths, and sometimes, you know, we can shake hands along the way when we're parallel. Sometimes we diverge, but we always come back to our roots because why? We're naturopathic oncologists. So thanks everybody for joining us. This is just a nice chat between two naturopathic oncology colleagues and friends.
I love it, Doc. You nailed it. Like, we go way back. We have watched things come and go in this field, right? We have both kind of been the living, learning laboratories ourselves. I've even come with patients to your clinic years ago while I was still in private practice and got to see you in action in your interactions. Like you said, we kind of have passed each other many times over the years in conferences, and now we're at a place in our career where, boy, we get to take like a nice inventory of all the exciting things that are happening out there and on all the things you're involved in and I'm involved in. And honestly, I feel really hopeful that we get to be around long enough to watch real change happening and feel very hopeful about what's to come.
You know, thank you for that. Absolutely. And may I say it, global. And your influence, I'm not going to say you're an influencer because I think we need to talk about like what influencers are. Maybe we can hit on that because we've both been in the trenches with the real trenches. But you're global in showing influence in so many good quality things, and specifically the metabolic terrain aspect, but which is great because it's not just one thing, it's everything. You know, we live with the terrain inside of us and we trot upon the terrain, and there's now these sort of, I guess I could call it existential terrain threats, perhaps, like some of those that are less tangible, like EMF, right? I'm very interested in this, and I think a lot of these things threaten our quantumness of who we are as humans, and that's part of what this podcast is really seeking to explore. So people who are watching this have probably seen you speak either live or one of the many videos you have out there, podcasts, or your training sessions. Many of them may have gone through your training course and are actually seeing clients as well. Briefly, can you give us 1 minute just to set the stage about where your work has come from and where it is now from a terrain perspective and your current projects?
Yeah. Well, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity. I was just reminiscing here, standing here, thinking about the time you said, "Aren't you from Kansas? Don't you know that there was this guy that was doing high-dose IVC?" And funny thing, a really quick story for the listeners. I used to go to this place because it was the only place to find a vegetarian meal in all of Wichita, Kansas at the time. I was a vegetarian. And this man would talk to me, like this man would kind of sit down with me, and I'd saw him a few times over the years. It would be years later when this man before us, Dr. Dan Rubin, said to me, "Hey, aren't you from Kansas? Do you know about this place?" And I had no idea what was really happening there outside of a place where I could get a vegetarian meal. And Dr. Dan ended up going there and learning high dose IVC, and it's really interesting. I'm getting ready to present at their 50-year anniversary in the fall. So talk about full circle that I get to be here with you right now having this. But beyond that,
I'll be there with you.
Oh yeah, okay, we're going to be there. She's going to be good. So exactly, like there's the circle again of life. But what you were speaking to in metabolic terrain, in 1914, Theodore Bovary coined the concept of the somatic mutation theory of cancer, which today in modern terms, we would call that the genetic cause or the genetic theory of cancer. And yet a few years after his understanding, kind of a controversial character by the name of Otto Warburg hit the scene and said, hey guys, maybe it's happening a little upstream from the gene. Maybe we should be looking at the fact that the mitochondria in our healthy cells look very different than the mitochondria in our cancer cells. And for the next, 30 years, his theory, his approach of cancer as a metabolic or a mitochondrial disease was really on the forefront. And thanks to the findings of Watson and Crick and the DNA helix, we veered yet again, the pendulum swung back into the realm of genetics, and the Otto Warburg ideas of metabolic mitochondrial theory of cancer kind of just laid to rest for a long period of time till the early 2000s, maybe mid 2005 to 2010, before Tom Seyfried's book really hit the airwaves. I think in 2011, it started to make a bit of a resurgence. And so for anyone listening, they might go, what the heck is this woman getting at? Let me just start by saying that we still have a system, a medical model that thinks that the cancer is a genetic disease. Now, it is in 5 to 10% of situations, but the majority, 90 to 95%, is actually something beyond the gene or above the gene. And this is where some of these other theories floating around might do a better job of exploring and asking different questions. And so the way I like to explain what metabolic or mitochondrial drivers of cancer are is really simple. It's 3 parts. Okay. You have this mitochondria, which we all learned in 6th grade was just the mighty mitochondria, and its only job was to make ATP, which very important, but what we've learned, wouldn't you say in the last 10, 20 years, it does a heck of a lot more than just that. So we've kind of still being taught that the only job that it does is creating ATP, but
it's so much more than that.
So much more. And I think that's where I think about it first. Think about your mitochondria, because this is getting into the physical, the tangible.
I'm thinking about them. What do they look like? People usually say they're little green footballs inside your cells. And where do they come from?
Wow, good question. So where they come from is bacteria.
What do you mean?
We are mostly upwards, mitochondria speaking, upwards of 20% of our mass are these ancestral bacterium.
Ancestral is an important word there.
Yeah. Ancestral and bacterium. When you think about what's in, on, and around us in our food supply, our water supply, our air, our medications today.
We're so scared of bacteria as a human population in America. I mean, everywhere that, you have these hand sanitizer stations and wash this, sterilize it. Is that hurting our mitochondria?
Oh, indeed. Indeed. And the biggest aggravator of our mitochondria is now just ubiquitous. It is in our rainwater, in our soil, in our air. It completely absorbs.
Don't say glyphosate.
Oh, I know. You don't want me to, but that's what it does.
It is. It's all around. It's really hard to get rid of living in a municipal area, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard to
These things actually injure our mitochondria, and you were saying that the mitochondria are so much more than these powerhouses of the cell that create ATP. What else do they do?
Well, I think of them as receivers.
Okay.
Right? They're like antennas reaching out into the world around them, in, on, and around them, to each other, to the other system, the other little organelles, the other cells, the other tissue, the cytoplasm, the swimming pool that they're hanging out in. They're taking cue from that, but they're also taking cue from everything coming at them, from light. You're just getting into the quantum a bit. We can come back to that in a bit. To sound, to even thoughts, go figure. But definitely the types of things we fuel them with, so our food choices are
Types
many.
of vibrations is what it sounds like you're talking about.
I know is
Our
who we
foods affect our mitochondrial function, the number of them, or all of the above?
all the above. So number of, function of, and behavior. So function on one level, but even more of just how do they get along with each other.
Okay. Well,
So
how do mitochondria get along with other mitochondria?
yeah,
Oh, well,
yeah,
that's interesting too.
yeah,
So
yeah.
mitochondria derive from bacteria and they live inside our cells. So there's been some kind of fusion or some kind of agreement that we had with bacteria long ago. Without them, people who are born with inborn errors of mitochondrial diseases, they tend to not survive very long because that's how important they are for sustaining life. And then just by certain thoughts, certain vibrations, ill light, not enough sunlight, I'm thinking, they can be affected.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Can
And yeah, go ahead.
no, you go ahead. You're the guest, and I think what you were going to say is way more important than what I was going to ask.
Well, I think we're on the same. I think we're both getting excited when you think
Hmm.
about, I mean, again, we are naturopathic doctors
Hmm.
who the fundamentals, the determinants of health that are the foundation of our education include our food, our water, our light. So basically, you start to realize we're just kind of glorified houseplants. But also our geography, our geology, our cycle of our life, not just our relationship to the cycle of life around us.
Hmm.
All of those things are input into the system and specifically into those receivers of information known as our mitochondria. And the amount of changes that have happened in the last few hundred years, and for sure since World War II, have sped up the types of things we're being exposed to and diverged from sort of the path we all evolved from in such a way that I think our bodies and our mitochondria in particular are really overwhelmed and don't know how to translate that information and then don't know how to communicate out into the rest of the body and the other cells and tissues around them what to do with that information.
White blood cells have mitochondria in them. And so do mitochondria have specific languages that they talk to the immune system about, per se, that could be disrupted by these waves or these all right, lay it on me.
A worm, 100%. And so you nailed it. Virtually all tissues of our body have mitochondria. Okay. And in fact, there's a few, but actually studies in the last 2 years might even question this. We used to think that red blood cells didn't contain mitochondria, but now we're starting to maybe rethink that, which is interesting. But really, certain tissues mitochondria take up more valuable real estate in some tissues over others. So we have a high concentration of mitochondria in our heart, our muscles, our brain, and our liver. Basically, the things that are very, very important to keep us alive.
Okay, makes
To have a
sense.
lot of mitochondria, right? The things that, sperm, let's use that as an example. It has mitochondria, but not nearly as many as our eggs, right? And
Well, that would just sort of be the
example,
case anyhow as it goes in life.
right? Yeah. So just thinking about that for just a moment of what the implications of any of those tissues or those organs I just spoke to, a
Hmm.
lot of our chronic illnesses today seem to be rooted in the heart, in the brain or the mind, in the liver, in the digestion. And suddenly maybe we start to go, I
And in the
wonder
sperm. There's a lot of male infertility out there that I don't think it probably gets enough play. What would be a sample of like a mitochondrial based issue in the brain?
let's see here. Where do we begin? You all be, a lot of
Two
people would be
examples.
surprised. Yeah, but a lot of people would be surprised to say maybe Alzheimer's. You
Okay,
know,
fair enough.
there are many. So one of my friends, he's actually in your neck of the woods, Dr. Richard Fry, probably the most prolific researcher and publisher on the impact of mitochondrial disease in autism. 600
Wow.
publications on this
Now
topic.
that would be a big one. Autism is just so people can really understand what it means to have like a mitochondrial thing in the brain. But the brain isn't just the controller of everything, it's kind of the controller of everything, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it receives these waves and these signals differently because it translates it for the rest of the body. But it has so much, it's so robust in mitochondria. Can I really quickly just ask you to give an example of something? You said the liver, the GI, the brain, the heart. You're
Yeah.
talking about not necessarily places where people get cancer, but just chronic diseases that afflict Americans today.
Yeah. Yeah. And so basically, I believe, and the literature is suggesting, that all of our major chronic illnesses today are, in fact, at their core, mitochondrial derangements. So,
Which is,
cardiovascular disease,
they're
cancer,
bacterial.
exactly.
So we are injuring a part of our body, a very microscopic part of our body that isn't even of complete human origin.
Yeah.
I think we should all digest that for a second. I'm fascinated. There's more to this mitochondrial story than
Then we even
we know,
know.
especially when you said that we're starting to rethink that red blood cells may have like some hidden mitochondria somewhere?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because you
Adaptation?
yeah.
It
I'm wondering
is.
about that. Think about it. Part of it is just even the color of the red blood cells themselves. And when we think about light and the spectrum of light,
Okay.
and even tools that are even FDA approved in the treatment of cancer, for instance, being certain light therapies, photobiomodulation or photodynamic therapy, the light is interacting very specifically. This is where I get excited. This is where you get the quantum. That light is interacting with specific complexes within the mitochondria themselves.
Say that again.
The light and the spectrum of the light are interacting with very specific complexes, basically like little loading stations or loading docks in each of our mitochondria. So
Not necessarily the ones in the red blood cells that we think may be.
all
So,
the entire body.
so that
So
means
we've got
it depends upon the.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, just you go ahead, because this is where it goes, whoa!
Right, and we might this is a whoa moment. So but this means especially for people listening out there, it's not just all light. It means that the light has to penetrate to a certain depth, which is why people go undergoing red light or blue light or yellow, whatever wavelength therapy. There's a depth of penetrance in terms of how it's going to affect deeper structures. You do have skin mitochondria in your white blood cells or in your skin cells that can, I'm assuming, translate some of these light messages and these sound messages. But is it true that it's going to matter how deep it penetrates? For instance, a heat signal or a laser, which can penetrate a lot more deeply than a home unit.
Well, we used to think that that was just the case until we started understanding this concept of the abscopal effect of exposures to light, right? And so our retina is one of the portals, and also our eyeballs are one of the most mitochondrial rich environments as well. That is an original portal. Same with our skin. Our skin is like a photovoltaic, surface. And so, yes, the mitochondria at the deeper levels, like getting into the subcutaneous and into the muscular and into the, the vascular and into the organs, of course, those go deeper and have some impact, but they take cue from some of those superficial, exposures first that start to sort of gear up the rest of the body. And then the foods we take in, for instance, so red from the heme of certain animal types, the green from certain plant foods, the purple from certain plant foods. Those colors of even our food spectrum are interacting with those mitochondria.
100%. This is like taking in photonic energy. I mean, one of the highest representations or expressions of plant life is a fruit, right? And depending on the depth of the color of the fruit, I usually say to patients, hey, if you rub it on you and it stains your white shirt, it's probably really good for you and it's probably very potent and there's very specific times you should eat it. That does have photonic energy, and you're saying it has a photonic message to give to our mitochondria.
Yeah.
The light, the eyeballs or retinas as portals for light. Is there a specific type of light that would be particularly negative towards mitochondria?
That's so interesting, because I was just at a light conference, a huge international laser light conference this weekend, and fascinating. I mean, there's amazing clinical trials on the use of light to completely correct things like macular degeneration, some actual ocular diseases. And there was concern about using short or long wave light and exposing yourself to causing retinal damage. But we're actually finding that it doesn't seem to be. Now, you probably don't want to have infrared light poured into your eyeball.
Right.
That one's probably a problem. But the rest of the sort of visual spectrum doesn't seem to be negative in its impact. In fact, can be quite healing or even curative in some of the literature, depending on the goal of therapy. Like if you're dealing with maybe an eye infection, maybe you're using a green or a blue spectrum. If you're just looking at maybe an antidepressant, maybe a yellow spectrum. If you're looking at something to actually regenerate like mitogenesis or wound healing, maybe a red spectrum. There's all of these different ways that these lights can bring their own medicine to the table.
So two things about that. One, I think for the listeners, as we're having a chat here, which is wonderful, and thank you for educating us all because this is fantastic. One, somebody may be thinking about, well, what about the blue light on our personal mobile devices that we, sit very at a short distance from and we're exposed to chronically, and everything's digital nowadays. And then a lot of people are chatting about early sunlight and sort of that low angle light. That's number one. And then number two, do you think that we see us moving, sort of distancing ourselves somewhat from pharmaceuticals and moving more into a more advanced realm and a more sophisticated realm where we actually are using frequencies that are in harmony with our body to heal the diseases that may have been caused by disharmonious consequences?
Well, first of all, I'm so glad you qualified that, because I was thinking more specifically of treatment of light, but you're correct that today we're spending less than 15 minutes a day outdoors as Americans. So we're not getting that full spectrum, especially that sunrise to sunset, and the importance of the light and how it interacts with our circadian rhythm pathways as well, which is a whole nother animal we could, talk about. But to your point about the harmful effects of just exposures to extremely high doses of the blue light, which is coming from our screen time and also coming from our screen time at inappropriate times of the day. So you don't really want to have a nice big dose of this, say, before the sunrise or after the sunset, because that's going to have implications on your metabolic health, your circadian rhythm health, your hormonal health, your sleep patterns, your mental health. But it definitely can there's some shown damage of the reactive oxygen species that can happen to the mitochondria in the midst of too much harmful blue light from the non-natural sources. So I'm glad that you clarified that, and I want to come back because there's good evidence people could go down that road. To your next level of could something like this replace standard of care? At the very least, it enhances it, right? Which I think is super exciting. In fact, yeah, right. And
we can only put so many things in our body and expect our body to metabolize them and respond and okay, and sort it out, right? That's our GI. And a lot of people have diseases of the GI, like you said, which are based on disharmonious frequencies to begin with. And then we put other hard to understand man or human made molecules in there. So, sorry.
We've been messing with this for far too long. I mean, when you think about it, 150 years ago, we were all kind of like Little House on the Prairie, chop wood, carry wood.
I watched it. Oh, yeah.
We were in that zone of an average 4 hours a day we were walking. We were very, very in rhythm with the sunrise, sunset. We were using candlelight, firelight. That was the way we cooked our food. That was the way we read, that we made love, that we did all the things. We were very physically, took a lot of energy to even find or grow the food that we ingested. We expended a lot to get the resources in return. And so that just has continuously changed. And now our body is we just don't have to do anything. You literally do not have to leave the comfort of your own home. Everything can be shopped for you, done for you, even moved. Your own body can even be moved in devices and whatnot that you don't have to lift a finger if you don't want to, which is to our detriment. Our bodies are kind of just jelly. Now, when we're looking at about 93% of Americans are considered metabolically unhealthy, which means 93% of us are walking around with kind of mucked up mitochondria. And so we want to start to bring in the resources of reestablishing a rhythm, right, within ourselves. And you spoke to this already. How do we start to harness the natural light in, on, and around us? How do we start to take advantage of the natural rhythms of who we are and where we came from? How do we remember?
Is it difficult to do?
You'd think it wouldn't be, but it's incredible. I mean, I know you get this when you're asking your patients, walk me through a day in your life.
Yeah.
You know, what time do you get up? What time do you go to bed? What time do you eat? What time do you have a bowel movement? What time, like walk me through just your general pattern. It's shocking how few people, the people will go days without leaving their house.
I don't understand. And really, a lot of people I talk about are seeing nature on a 2D representation, which is a screen, and I think our eyes just really need to see depth, and our brain can see different levels of light, feeling different terrains, if you will, under your feet, different altitudes. And you and I are super simpatico on this, especially that really the absence of movement is what?
Ugh, exactly.
Yeah.
And we want to be in motion, emotion, in motion, interacting with the world in, on, and around us. And the last few years has also done us a disservice in that we can be as connected. Like Dr. Dan and I can be talking from different, countries right now, which is super cool. But there's nothing like being able to sit down and have a cup of tea with you in person somewhere. That interaction, the amount of oxytocin I would release and being in your field, being
Yes.
through you is very different than what is being released between screens.
Which is interesting because you mentioned the clinic in Wichita, and they used to have a Faraday cage there, and they were doing Kirlian photography, which we should probably at least mention somehow because you talked about being in the field and the oxytocin, and it's basically suggesting that each living thing has a certain field that they project from itself or themselves, which can then be felt or understood or translated or whatever the correct word is now by the proximate being, which you and I are having tea. It's you and I, and it obviously would matter the vibe of that tea and where it was grown and the intention of the person growing it and the conditions, and then who made it and the intentions of who made it. And because you remember Bill Mitchell brought forth a seventh principle in naturopathic medicine, which was intentionalism. And that you and I, when we see patients, there's an amazing intentionalism. The work that you do, I have chills, hoping the audience will have chills. If the physician that these people are seeing doesn't have the right intent, then I think energetically, it's gambling.
Yeah.
So sitting down and feeling that, we were talking about Kirlian photography, and it's important because there's a dampening now of those fields around us, which brings me into a subject that I really want to talk about, bringing it back to mitochondria, is electromagnetic fields or electromagnetic frequencies, EMFs, that, we're talking about that there's a certain hertz or a frequency that the earth is and that our human bodies understand, that we grew up with. Doesn't matter what religion you are or what you conceive of or how you believe in evolution or not, or if you even believe we're here, the fact that we're talking here and listening, we're here, we're somewhere, we are existing in some manner of speaking, and that there's a certain frequency of that. Those frequencies that we've created are now, I'm guessing, really affecting our mitochondria from an EMF perspective. And how does that play into the work that you're doing?
It's interesting. A few years back, Deborah Davis, she's actually going to be presenting at a conference we're hosting in Arizona in the fall. Her organization, Environmental Health Trust, has just volumes of really good data, really good information from around the globe of the brightest of bright researchers and clinicians on this topic, because part of the answer to that question, Dan, is we don't know. Okay. But there are some of us on a spectrum that are far more sensitive to the experience of this than others, right? And yet we can actually measure mitochondrial respiration. We can actually measure the voltage coming off of our cells. We can measure oxidative stress in our patients and see what happens. You've heard of the studies of people going camping for 2 weeks and completely resetting, their pathways, their sleep cycles, their menstrual cycles, their bowel habits, being completely off the grid, as far away from, Wi-Fi and electricity as possible, within a short period of time, reset, because they're plugging into that field that is around us everywhere. But when you start to lay asphalt and concrete and buildings and second and third and fourth
Mm.
and 80th stories,
Suffocating the earth.
you're not tapping into that anymore,
So do
right? And
people
so,
need to walk on the earth with their bare feet? Is that what you're saying? They do.
yes, they do. And in certain situations in the world, in highly urbanized environments, that may be more difficult.
Yeah.
So there are ways to replicate that. There are certain things like, yeah, I mean, I think you even knew,
Grounding
Dr.
sheet?
Snell. Yeah, like the grounding sheets and some of these things that can give you at least a representation. I mean, nothing's as good
Right.
as the original, right, as nature. But if you have to, if someone lives or works in a high story building, perhaps you want to take those extra opportunities when you are outdoors, whenever you can, look for the types of earthing shoes or ways to connect yourself or be as barefoot as often as you possibly can. For me, I live now for my own health. I travel so much and it really is hard on my body being in an airplane every week all over the globe. So I now live on the ocean because I know exactly when I take that morning walk, watching the sunrise every morning when I am home, my health recovers very, very quickly. It's
Important.
very measurable and it's notable, both subjectively as well as objectively. And so whatever means you have access to get yourself as close to the original nature of your being, to the original nature around you, the more you benefit yourself and those around you, your own families. Take them barefoot walking with you on these excursions as well.
Are you fascinated by mitochondria?
To put it mildly.
Do you think that you've found out everything that you need to already about mitochondria?
I honestly, Dan, I mean, even in the years I've studied this for over 30 years now, I feel like almost every year we've learned something new about these crazy cats. And I'm so in awe that what we thought was just about energy creation, we now understand that it's in charge of it's what takes out the garbage.
Mm-hmm.
Our apoptosis, our programmed cell death, is under the direction of our mitochondria. Our longevity is under the influence of our mitochondria. Our response to stressors and our ability to kind of Wonder Woman bracelet away the 60,000 plus insults a day are thanks to our mitochondria. Those are just some examples that we've been learning in the last few years, if not the last decade. And I think we're just scratching the surface. I think we are being humbled to the core that something we have co-evolved with for, some scientists say upwards of 170,000 years is probably got some wisdom that we should heed.
Incredibly and ridiculously and phenomenally exciting
Yeah.
that we're being able to translate this now, and which means that there's more to come, that this isn't going to get boring for you, basically.
Never a dull moment in our world, my friend. Never a dull moment.
From a mitochondrial perspective too, it almost sounds like this is conversations with your mitochondria, and that that people meditate, but there are ways to converse with them, and what you were saying. I mean, different frequencies of light, different frequencies of sound, and I mean, for instance, we send a lot of people to sound baths, or we suggest that for that. And there's absolutely a difference in the vibe coming out of a speaker if you're watching the same hertz frequency on say video or on YouTube than it is going into a room where the bowls are being played or the instruments are being played. So those are conversations. You really just have to figure out what works for you. Is it crystal? Is it metal? What frequencies? Which bowls? Which practitioner? What the intent is? These are things. It's probably frightening for people to think about the massiveness of what needs to happen. So is there a way for people to just get started, whether it's by reading your book or reading some of your colleagues' books, or even can they just do something right now after they're done listening to our discussion?
Yeah, I mean, let's just take for a quick moment. We evolved from storytelling. We evolved from songs. The practice of medicine of Ayurveda is considered the great grandmother of medicine. It was taught through the sutras. It was literally taught through song. It vibrated into the clinician and passed on for over 5,000 years. We go to church to sing, to be enjoy, to sing. We have cultures in the native communities, the indigenous communities, drums and sounds there. The bowls you talked about, the singing bowls, even down. Let's go from as primitive as that started to today in modern medicine. We use something called histotripsy, which is basically a sound wave that busts up tumors, just like the high-pitched operatic singer shattering a glass. That's happening in our cells. So when you start to think about that, no wonder music is such a powerful medium for so many people. Like, what about it? Next time you're listening to a song that you love, tune in. Where do you feel it in your body? What do you like about it?
Yeah, it's a great point. And a lot of people may not be able to be in touch enough with their body to feel where it is in their body. And so that might be great practice for them to be like, okay, I'm going to take this song and, the next 10 times I listen to it, I'm going to figure out, like what Dr. Nasha said, where do I feel it in my body? And do you suspect that they may feel it in a part of their body where they may need help with their real health?
For sure. I mean, especially when I hear how much it can move emotion, trapped emotion. When someone says, oh, this one makes me want to move or dance or laugh or sing, or others saying this one really makes me want to cry, or even some are really drawn to the music that makes them want to just like rage, and like move, charge energy that is pent up. And so there's such power to that. And so within the book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, it's talking about all these things that you are being exposed to on a day-to-day basis, that it's impacting the health and the wealth of your mitochondria. So, that is where you can begin, is just doing kind of your own audit, if you will, of everything you're putting in, on, and around you, including people. Okay. So people like Dr. Candace Pert, who was one of my early influencers, Dr. Robert Ader, who coined the concept of psychoneuroimmunology. People that by the time I read his book, it was 20 years after my original diagnosis when Dr. Bruce Lipton's book, Biology of Belief, came out, but his research was back in the 80s and 90s showing the impact of even our thought on our methylation, on our mitochondria. We've had these studies for decades, but now we can sort of prove what we feel or prove what we see anecdotally as clinicians or that patients' experiences are sharing. And so the opportunity is to get curious, explore your own terrain, understand what feels right and doesn't feel right in you, and go deeper in the places where you are feeling stagnant or confused or stuck. You reach out to colleagues like Dr. Dan and myself who think of you more than just a disease, who think of you more than or a tumor type, who understand that you are at this incredibly beautiful ecosystem that's interfacing with the ecosystems around you.
Well, fascinating. I mean, there's so much depth here, and I can't wait to see what your work brings in terms of mitochondria. And I know you're going to be blasting it out to us when it's ready and the testing is ready. Freeze there for a second. So I paused too, just because I know that people really hang on to the words that you say, and I wanted them to know they weren't missing anything there. That was just a little blank space. Any thoughts in terms of upcoming stuff?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think you're part of some of the solution. I think getting back to helping our immune system do its job by reintroducing what we call the 3 R's of the immune system, helping the immune system, first of all, recognize, and then respond, and then remember. And I know a gig that you're part of now is very integral in helping those 3 R's get back online. So that's
good work together.
Yeah. And then understanding and getting curious and diving deeper in this mitochondrial metabolic space is the other kind of pillar, I think, of what's hope on the horizon. And I think to some of these tools that are out there that are, kind of come from nature, that have been sort of upgraded into sort of biotech, that actually may be a friend to improving upon standard of care as we know it and sort of taking it into the next generation. I think there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon, a lot of exciting research, and frankly, a lot of hope.
I agree. I think biotech is there's real good stuff coming down the pipe. And I think at the end of the day, it's the person out there who's either yourself or intentionalism really is a big thing in the field. You're sitting face to face in the company of your physician, or practitioner, or body worker. So much has gone virtual lately. It's really not the same. So I really, really do appreciate what you said about sitting, having tea at a coffee shop together, and really feeling the vibe, and energies collide in a very good way and match. So it's important for those people out there who don't already know. How can they find it?
Well, start simply. You can go to drnasha.com, drnasha.com. You can also check out some of our nonprofit endeavors where we're raising funds for both research as well as patient grants, patient access to these types of resources that Dr. Dan and I were talking about today. And that's mtih.org. That's Metabolic Training Institute of Health. .org. And then to learn about some of the other things that we're creating, a data platform to sort of show the proof of concept of all of this in real time, a product line that's very, very specific to mitochondrial health and rejuvenation, as well as an education platform, whether you are a patient or a caregiver or a mid-level allied health professional or even a clinician who's looking to expand your horizons in this arena. You can find that at terrainholding.com for all of that information. And then if you haven't started with the Metabolic Approach to Cancer book, that's kind of the OG starting point of how I took 20 some years of my own life experience and dumped it into one place. And then a couple years ago, myself and a couple colleagues wrote a beautiful book about mistletoe and the future of integrative oncology. Very hopeful, bringing in conventional oncology, a hematology oncologist, anthroposophical clinician, another naturopathic doctor, and folks who've been practicing for 30, 40 years into a book that I'm really proud of that does show a little bit of light on the horizon of what's to come, I think, in this field. And so lots of ways to stay in touch, get in touch, be in touch, and I look forward to hearing from all of you.
Well, awesome. All right, for Rubin on Point, we're out. Thank you for joining us on Rubin on Point, a podcast about cancer, resilience, and most of all, about being human. I hope today's conversation inspired you to see new possibilities for growth, healing, and strength in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a little extra resilience in their day. Remember, no matter what challenges you're facing, resilience isn't just about bouncing back. It's about building a life of purpose, connection, and vitality. Until next time, stay strong, stay healthy, and take care of yourself and those around you.